Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna swing over and talk to that young man today. I'll swing over and talk to him today. Tell him to give you a shout. Mhm. What's that? Dario? Yeah.
Trying to find ideas how to get things done before I leave tomorrow.
New York is getting to be like California. It's a good place to be from. Sorry.
Yeah. Same way. 4 days. Next weekend, 4 days following.
Okay, we will call the January 30th council workshop to order. And first part of the meeting will turn over to Jenny so she can go through your presentation.
Take it away. All right. Can everyone, there we go. I think people can hear me. Thank you, Mayor Ryan. Good afternoon, council members and staff. Just a couple of housekeeping things. I think some of you've noticed there are some treats over here. Feel free to help yourself throughout the meeting. I'm going to be talking for a little while, so I thought would be a good opportunity. If you'd like to have a snack and kind of settle in, you can definitely do that. I will go through a handful of slides and kind of walk us through the packet information, and then we will turn it over to council discussion. There's sets of microphones, so hopefully Mark and Mark can both just take turns using the handheld. Thank you. It's great to have this recorded and be able to refer back to it if we need to, so we'll do the best we can with it. So we're here today to talk about the 2023-2024 City Council priorities. When we set this meeting up in early January, we talked about setting goals for 2023. But in thinking about it and thinking of the projects we have in front of us, I think it would make sense to both talk about the short term, what we expect to get done this year, and also what we'd like to get done in the next year as well. Since pretty soon we'll be talking about the 2024 budget, we should also talk about the goals within that and work to do both of those in sync. So we have some objectives today. Hopefully we can spend some time reviewing our strategic plan efforts over the past couple of years. I'll walk us through some of the principles behind where we started a couple years ago and the things we've accomplished since then. We'll do a quick review of the city purchasing policy just to have that frame of reference and reminder. We will discuss current projects, where they're at, and funding options and timelines that contain therein. So better if I'm over here. Am I in you guys' way? How's that? Well, maybe, well, and when we have conversation, yeah, definitely with conversation. Yeah. And then hopefully at the end of this, we're going to start our planning work with what those 2023-24 citywide goals are. I don't expect, although if we get to that point, that's great, but I don't expect us to come to our final list of goals today. We should have some plans and some ideas that we can work towards, that we can come back and present a final product based on the input that you give us today. Ultimately, all of these things should come together that will align the city council's priorities over the next 2 years and help establish expectations and directives for staff. So we'll start with the first objective, which would be to review our strategic plan efforts and our purchasing policy. The next couple of slides, I think you have all seen a handful of times, but when we implemented the strategic plan a couple of years ago, we were looking for a way to link our comprehensive plan, which is our 30,000-foot view guiding document for the city, with our annual citywide budget and those resources contained therein. To ultimately get to how do we implement those things, and using the strategic plan was a way to link those two items. We've talked about the goals previously as far as what we want to accomplish within that. I think the takeaway for me when I think about our strategic plan work is how do we maintain relevance in what we do and the services we provide? How do we set our goals and achieve that accomplishment for the community, for what they're looking for in the next 2, 5, 10 years. And so these are all things that, of course, we want to achieve with that, but really it's that relevancy to remain effective within what the work we do. So within our strategic plan categories, we're familiar with each of these 5, but I'll talk about them briefly. Over the past couple of years, there's a range within the objectives within each category. And what I mean by that is there have been staff goals that we've accomplished that are very operational day-to-day things that achieve the strategic plan. And then there have been long-term capital intensive infrastructure improvements. So it's a range across the board for each category. I'll give some examples. So with our long-range infrastructure plan, that is our 10-year capital improvement plans for all departments. That encompasses our equipment, our buildings, and our infrastructure. We have done great work with our equipment piece specifically. We've moved that forward. That was the first thing we could pick up and really move the needle on the quickest, was to establish what those equipment needs are and try to develop that plan. We're working on the buildings. We will be talking about that in a little bit. In November, you received a report from Tom regarding the current status of our buildings. And we decided in November that would be a good conversation to have early in 2023. And then the infrastructure piece, basically roads, infrastructure that's outside of within what we use specifically as staff. So roads, lift stations, other types of infrastructure is going to be that third component to the long-range infrastructure plan. So we spent the last couple of years building those out really well. Policy and ordinance synchronization. So we've been working on maintaining regular reviews of our policies and our ordinances, making sure those are relevant and applicable to the work we're doing today. For example, as you know, planning and zoning is working through their shoreline ordinance review. That's a major check mark as far as our strategic plan and how that ties into our comprehensive plan. Employee retention and satisfaction plan. Last year, the biggest accomplishment, I think the thing that really is helping us with going into this year, was the creation of the Employee Retention Committee. So they are up and running. They have met a couple of times, and I think that will really help us move this category along further in this year. Operations efficiency plan. We have worked more intentionally with working across departments for different things. Looking at within how we do our own work within our department to ensure that we're being efficient and that we're utilizing our time and our technology resources appropriately. And then our safety plan. Last year, we established our safety committee internally for the city. We updated our policy, and we will be ensuring that all departments complete some level of safety training in 2023 and continuing to build it out from there. This document was approved in December along with the 2023 budget, and it encompasses all of those things: comprehensive plan, strategic plan, and all of the related budget and financial information as well. So I just wanted to remind everyone that that was available. Our purchasing policy, just a quick high-level overview. We have 2 categories within our purchasing policy for unbudgeted expenditures and for budgeted expenditures. And so department heads have either are up to $2,500 authority to spend on things that are unbudgeted that come up. Up to $10,000, I can give that approval as well. And then anything over $10,000 requires council approval. For budgeted items, anything up to $5,000, the department heads can make that purchase. And then up to 10 requires my approval. And then over 10, the council would have to approve that. Something we've been doing better with over the past year or so, and I think we'll keep working on, is as we go through the budgeting process, if we can get council approval on larger purchases at that time, especially when we know we're going to have lead time for equipment and other things, it just makes everything so much more efficient instead of planning for it, budgeting for it, and then waiting till January to come back and say, now let's go ahead and authorize the purchase, because then you have to refamiliarize yourself with everything. So the more we can get council approval to place the order, to move forward with things at the time that they're budgeted for, I think will help that efficiency side of things. I'm going to stop there real quick and just ask if there are any questions. I know that was mostly a review for everybody, but okay. Yes.
On the 10,000, I look at like insurance premium, how many things can you approve up to 10,000? How many 10,000s can you approve without the city going to the council? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I would say we haven't identified that, because I would likely doubt that there would be multiple things within a department that comes up that needs that. But more often than not, I do tend to make sure that I am keeping the council in the loop if something were to continue to happen where we needed to have that, or would just be something that we'd have to talk to the council if it felt that it was getting beyond. Yeah, I mean, from an individual department perspective, I would look at them within their own situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Second objective, to talk about the status of various projects, funding options, and timelines. So item C1 in your packet is a summary of the strategic plan worksheets that we discussed throughout the 2022, but it was for the 2023 budget process. So in the PDF packet, there were 48 pages of strategic plan worksheets that staff worked to put together for you in review of all of their budgeting considerations. I summarized them for you in that one document so you could see just high level that information. And I just want to walk through it real quickly for you. So at the top of that spreadsheet, I did put a key for the strategic plan categories that each item represents. So the first 3 columns on that spreadsheet will reflect the department, the project description, and then what strategic plan category it's referring to. And then the next 4 columns will give you the status of something that was as of a week ago when I put that together, the cost that was known more than likely at the time that that worksheet was completed, a potential funding source, and any relevant notes that would be helpful to the council. So let's go through the first 2 just to walk through them because they're pretty different, and I think it helps to describe that range of strategic plan categories that I was talking about earlier. So the first item is from the admin department, and it was to provide support for the capital improvement plan build out. So it hits the long range infrastructure strategic plan category. It's an ongoing thing that we do. So every year as part of the budget process, finance staff is going to support all of the varying departments in completion of that capital improvement plan. There's no cost to the city. We do that as part of our budgeting work. No funding source required. So that was a reflection of something that was very day-to-day operational that we are doing as staff, but that it's really important, an important objective as part of the strategic plan process that we provide that support. The second item says it's the admin and public works departments, and it's for city hall improvements. That is the category long range infrastructure and operations efficiency. The status is not complete, and the cost, I put the cost for the first phase, I'll call it, of that project, which involved some of our roof repairs, some new windows, and some other things, along with the potential remodel of the building. And I put the funding source as a potential bond. I think we'll talk about that more with the building matrix. In the notes, I do include the varying components of that. If you recall, the report from Widseth gave us the things we need to improve and complete now, some remodel options, and then a building addition option if we felt that that would be appropriate. So that's an example of one of those long range infrastructure items that's very capital intensive, planning required, things like that. So both meeting the goals in very different ways. It also addresses the operations efficiency because we tried to streamline how staff moves throughout the building. How can we better serve the public, those kinds of things as well. So I won't go through the whole sheet, but certainly we can revisit that worksheet and put that up on the screen if the council would like to discuss that more during your conversation. But I wanted to walk through how that sheet is put together for you, and I'll stop quick and see if there's questions. Okay.
I got one
Yep.
question. Is there anywhere on here that you have a cost of what it's taken to get to this, like outside input drawings from WSN, whatever, each one of these categories?
I don't, I certainly can. There's going to be very few that we've actually gone to the step of having somebody do a study. So the city hall improvements might be one of the only ones, but I could definitely add that for you. Okay, the building matrix. I included the report information from November that outlines Tom's detailed report, and I included 3 spreadsheets for you for reference. I copied and pasted the ranking section of the memo because that's probably the most relevant for us to focus on in the beginning. So listed by worst condition to best condition. And you will see that I have highlighted in blue 3 buildings. Now let me talk first about Spirits, the Warming House, and the Community Center. As you know, with Spirits, we lease the building from a private business. And so with that, we were sort of taken out of some of that ultimate authority to make decisions about what we do to the building and when. So that's a slightly different conversation we have to have in cooperation with our lessor. So I'd say we should set that one aside for now. And our warming house and our community center, while the community center might not be specifically in the parks plan, that's definitely a component of the parks master plan conversation we're having. And all of those things need to be considered together. So I think that those 2 are definitely separated out from that, which leaves these 3 as our highest priority building needs. With the fire hall, it's still in very good condition, the building is, but the one exception is that it needs a new roof. So we should work through vetting when we're gonna do that, how we want to pay for it, etc. For the pickle and for City Hall, I've talked a little bit about the City Hall remodel and improvements that we need. For the pickle, as you probably have seen in the report, there are a lot of things that need to be addressed. So that will be something that we can come back to and have conversation with when it's your turn to work through priorities, but certainly things that we want to get direction on. How are we going to move through the building matrix conversation? How do we prioritize that in light of other projects? Questions on the building matrix? Okay. Last objective is to start to talk about our citywide goals. Item D1 in your packet is very similar to C1 in that I compiled, actually took the sheet that Amber provided to us, and I added a whole bunch of other city projects on top of that. So hopefully this is a pretty comprehensive look at the projects that we have are currently underway, or that we need to look at starting at some point. Let me do a quick overview of the spreadsheet itself again. So the first column is our department. Second column is a description of the project. Third column is an estimated completion date. There's a lot of to be determined. There's a lot of things that we've talked very broadly and sort of trying to figure out where those might work, but I did include a couple of dates for us to work through as part of the conversation. I have cost information in the next column. I have potential funding source, either known or ideas for that. And then any notes that would be helpful within these projects that we know of now, or might help us along the way with that conversation. So that page potentially would be one that we would want to focus on here when we have our discussion as far as which of these major projects we want to spend time prioritizing, that kind of thing. I summarized on the screen what's in your packet, which is the varying council feedback ideas that I received thus far. As you can see, there's quite a list of things. And that's okay because certain departments are going to work on certain things and can do that simultaneously. So we just have to make sure that we're all focusing these efforts in one direction and working towards a common goal. Funding options. So I've listed a handful of hopefully capturing most of all the opportunities for funding options. That we have the general fund levy. Everyone understands what that's about. We have bonding. We can do general obligation or revenue bonding. So with general obligation, the bonds are backed by the full weight of the city taxing authority. Or revenue bonds, those would come into play if we have a dedicated funding stream that would then generate revenues to pay off those bonds. We see revenue bonds for enterprise funds, so for sewer, for liquor, things like that, because there's a revenue stream dedicated that we can, if we can show that there's revenues to generate that, to pay that debt service, that would be a revenue bond. We have grants, federal, state, and local grants. It's correct to say that Nisswa has historically struggled to access a lot of grant monies because of our tax base and because of our median income. However, there are a significant number of grants at the federal and the state level now with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. There's hundreds and hundreds of new grant opportunities. So it's not something that I think we should just dismiss outright. It's going to take some work and some research to figure out, but I think there's definitely opportunities there. And then local grant opportunities, thinking of Sourcewell, the Bremer Foundation, potential other local organizations that we could look at doing more with potentially. I think that's definitely there and an option. We have local option sales tax. I think that's something that the council is interested in talking more about and understanding more, so we can talk about that. I'd be happy to walk you through that process or timeline, whatever that looks like. And then fundraising. So fundraising is definitely something to pursue. I did meet with Terry Foster at the Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation to learn more about some options for fundraising. I think it's important that if we want to look at that as an option, that we create the vehicle that we can work that fundraising program through. So for example, I'm going to pick on pickleball. If we want to create some kind of fundraising opportunity to generate money for pickleball, if we have a place for that money to go for people to donate, and we create the marketing materials and sort of what's the plan from a city perspective, maybe we're going to match dollars, maybe we're going to do something like that, then we can distribute that information and, you know, have conversations with community members with that information sort of set. So we're not just having really broad conversations that we don't know how to bring all that together. I'd like to see the council set the plan. We can facilitate those conversations if we set everything up on the front end. Does that make sense? Great. There's probably a lot of questions on funding, but as we get into detail specific projects, but any high level questions at this point?
Okay. As far as grants are concerned, do we have somebody who knows how to do that, or within our staff, or do we need to get somebody to help us?
Both. I think both are definitely options that we can pursue. I mean, part of it is it just takes time. It takes time to read through grants, to work through them, to find what criteria they're looking for, things like that. There will certainly be projects that we need to hire a grant writer for. I would anticipate that would be the case. But I think there could be a healthy mix of both. Yeah.
How much assistance was the Minnesota League of Cities able to offer when it comes to grant writing? Is there any at all?
They don't do grant writing themselves.
Yep.
They do actually have a new program where they will actually give you money to pay a grant writer. So they're looking to help invest in that way.
Is it I'm curious, I don't expect you to know, but is it per grant or is there like a per city cap on that? Because based off some of the projects found on the previous slide, such as say city water, that's gonna require a much more comprehensive one than say per fundraising for pickleball.
Yep.
right?
Yep. So yes, I can share a bit about that. It's actually a new pilot program that the league launched last fall. And it was due to they sold property and we had money to put towards something, and we wanted to provide small cities with the resources to be able to go and get these large projects. But there's an upfront initial investment cost that's required, engineering, things like that. And that initial investment is oftentimes the hurdle for small cities that they can overcome to get that. So the league's program is that it's a one-time up to $5,000 contribution for funding, could be for a grant writer, could be for anything really to help advance whatever that program is or that project you're looking to do. That's not to say that that will be the end of that. They've dedicated $500,000 to this program. So they want to see it used up and then go from there. I actually did a couple of weeks ago. I testified at the House committee hearing, a House committee hearing in support of this project. The state is looking at doing as well now. So if the state could get on board with something like this, that could be really significant for cities, small cities especially. That's our goal. So hopefully we can build momentum with that.
On top of hopefully some connections that we have or can discover per se through whether state or federal level, I think it's out there.
Yep.
I think it's out there.
Yep, definitely. I'm sure we'll come back to this slide and talk more about funding. Just a few other considerations. We still have some ARPA funding dollars that we need to allocate towards something. So there's no lack of things that we can work through that with. And then the legislature is in full swing. There are a lot of things happening right now. That was just a short list of things I thought off the top of my head, but keeping these things in mind as we look at our priorities to ensure that we're looking at opportunities for bills that are coming forward that might maybe give us more funding, bills that might come forward that will require additional budget impacts to the city. Things like that, additional licensing requirements like the adult use cannabis, that might be more work for us at some point to set up some kind of a licensing process or whatnot. So we just have to keep those things in mind as we're working on our priorities to make sure that we're not forgetting something significant that might come our way.
Can you speak a little bit more on the local sales tax legislation and
Yeah.
how that would pertain to us and how we could impose our own?
Yep. So right now, the way that the statute works is that a city has to receive legislative authority to implement a sales tax. So you have to go through the process through the legislature to get that approval. Then you take that to the voters through a referendum. So last year, a handful of cities went through that process, went through January through May, went through the whole thing, got everything to the finish line, and then the legislature didn't actually enact any of those sales taxes. So they're starting over this year again. There's also, I don't know the number, but there's a significant amount of other cities that are putting in for their own local sales tax requests. So it's creating a ton of work and just a lot of variables happening at the legislature. 2 bienniums ago, the league actually proposed to the legislature to change that legislation to basically say we don't need to come to the legislature anymore. It's just a local referendum. I mean, if your local taxpayer approves the sales tax, shouldn't that be good enough, essentially? So based on the number of cities that are looking to add the sales tax on top of the ones that already have it, they're looking at saying, let's try to simplify this process. And if it passes at the local level, maybe that's within the criteria that the statute also has, trying to keep it simple. So that potentially could come into play this session, that if we want to have this conversation, planning for next year might impact our process and our timeline.
Parameters around what type of sales tax is there?
Yep.
Is it flexible or is it determined at the state level, passed down to us?
It's defined. The best I can give you off the top of my head is that it has to have regional significance. So they want to see something that's going to impact more broadly than just we need a new city hall
Mhm.
type of thing. So there's a definition. It's definitely up to interpretation, and there's a lot of different sales taxes out there or things for different reasons. Environmental improvements that have to be made, a lot of parks and rec facilities, things like that, that can say we're drawing in more people or we're doing something for the greater good. And that's what they've tended to look at as opposed to just something very specific.
Do we know why they regulate this so much? Why not just allow any old place to put a sales tax on?
Yes, the legislature has given that authority, sort of that broad authority to counties with their transportation sales tax, like Crow Wing County has, but they haven't allowed that for cities. It's just something, I think, their way of saying we have some oversight over taxing authority. We don't want to see that get out of control or have too many, variables within that. But I think it's, at this point, seeing as something that's, for us as a community, as far as our tourist economy, that's definitely a different impact than a community that maybe has a very set group of residents that no variety, not as much variety, I would say, or variation in that population. So I think it's just their way to show oversight. Yeah. I think. Oh, one more slide. So I included in your packet just a general idea for our meeting schedule for this year that would help walk us through the next couple of years, or this year for the next couple of years for our priorities. So today we're in our January priorities goals meeting number 1. Based off of today, I'd like to compile and summarize all of the feedback and schedule a follow-up priority meeting. We can do that in a similar format as today, or we could also look at what I'm gonna call a retreat type of option. One of the most common feedback that I got from staff after our last budget process was that they wanted more time with the council. And trying to accomplish that in an hour workshop or an hour and a half workshop before a regular meeting, there's a lot going on, was really difficult. And they'd like to have more time to talk about their ideas, their vision for their department. So consider some kind of retreat, whether it's a half a day, a full day. I don't think we'd have any problem filling in a full day, but want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's schedules. But I think that would be something really positive to consider that we do, and that would help us then finalize what our priorities are for this year and have by, spring, have something that we can work towards.
Does that constitute a quorum?
Yeah, we just have to post it
Understood.
and notice it. If we're here, if we're at the community center, if we're somewhere else, we just have to post it.
I think you meant to say Grandview Lodge.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Hawaii,
Well,
there we go.
Nancy would have a story then, but we're not going to give you that.
She wants to go. She wants to come with us. I have proposed 3 budget meetings, June, August, and October. I think all of our budget meetings, workshops last year were really good, but it did feel like there were a lot of them. So trying to streamline where we can and be a little more efficient with time would be great. We have our preliminary levy and our final levy meeting dates as well. We also have the employee retention committee priorities. So when that group gets to a point where they want to talk through some of those with us, I anticipate that would happen around our priorities number 2 meeting timeframe. We'll want to incorporate that. And then we also have contract negotiations as well to incorporate into that. So while it looks pretty clean and simple, I mean, there are going to be a lot of variables that we're going to want to work through as we go. But I wanted to give you some idea of what I was thinking, trying to be most effective with everyone's time and work through the things we need to work through. Questions, suggestions, thoughts on the calendar?
My initial opinion on it is I think you can call it whatever you want, but I think that a retreat to be able to provide more time to the staff and get a good understanding. A more expanded workshop, absolutely, just so we can all then discuss and get on the same page. Because you're absolutely right. Sometimes these workshops we've had, especially in the 4th quarter, which gets very strenuous, and this past year was my first one, it's difficult to be able to have everybody fully explain and this is why we need additional staffing support. This is why I've come to that conclusion because of XYZ reasonings, and they do a great job. Sometimes we just try to be as diligent to the public as we are obligated to be. So I like the idea of retreat.
It creates a different sense, you know, you can have a different conversation, a little more, you know, informal, things like that.
Mhm.
So I think it'd be really helpful. So think about it. Let me know your feedback on schedule and we can continue to work towards that. All right. I am done with my part of that, but I am happy to facilitate. We can put spreadsheets, anything on, you know, from the packet on the screen. And I think this point, it's starting to work through our varying projects, timeframes, staff's here for questions, all that good stuff. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay.
Go from there.
Thank you very much. I guess at this point, what I would do is just, start on one end or the other. And look at trying to figure out what our priorities are, where we're going. I can start, or if somebody else wants to start. Doesn't matter to me. I know Jenny had yeah, thank you. Yep. I know hopefully everybody had a chance to talk to their department heads that they're liaison to. And got some input on different things and stuff. So, Jesse, you want to start us off? Or do you want me to? I can, that's fine.
I don't have a preference, so if you
Okay.
want to spearhead us.
My looking at it, talking, the departmental stuff is always going to come up. I mean, every year there's going to be something else the department needs. Hopefully they're prioritizing, they're going through their stuff with their staff, et cetera, and then it's going to come out. From a council perspective, the things that I have to say, I think that are, overall city, the tall stuff, the high stuff, if you will, the 30,000 foot view. I think we need to look at water, workforce housing, and as far as buildings go right now, the pickle, as was stated, is kind of maybe even fall into that park plan depending on what we do. I mean, but I look at the pickle and it doesn't make sense to put that kind of money into it. It makes probably more sense to think from scratch.
For a repair, you're saying?
Yeah, but
Right.
when you look at what we're gonna have to do to actually get it serviceable, it probably makes more sense. It's time to start over.
Yep.
But that's a whole different conversation, but for right now, but a new fire hall public safety building / government complex, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what does that look like? That's stuff that is far down the road, perhaps, but we need to start thinking now, because if that's the case, we need to find a place to do it. And the cost of land isn't going to get any cheaper. When I look at these three, I've talked to some people around the city that have worked on this stuff in the past, not just here, but in other communities. And having an economic development board, perhaps for the city, would be the way to go about it. But unlike some of our neighboring communities, it's got to be a narrow scope. It doesn't mean it can't take on other things, but one thing at a time. And for the workforce housing, what I'm hearing and what's been said in the past is that, an apartment style complexes. Well, will the people in the community, once it's explained to them why it's so important, and it's never really truly been explained to the public since I've been living here, since 01, back in 01 today, when we moved back here, it's never really been explained to a lot of people why it's so important. I think if the city gets out there, explains why we put that into it, we get the people that understand what it is out there to help us get that message out, and we find out. And I think people are going to realize, well, whether we want it or not isn't as relevant as whether we need it or not. And I think we're going to need it, but to do it as economically as possible for the people that may come in and build it, you're going to need city water.
Correct.
Fortunately, I don't think we have to buy the property for that. Other people have the property, but how do they economically go about doing it so that it's affordable to them, so they turn a profit on it, which is important because that's why they're in business. So, and I got no problem with that. So water, workforce housing kind of going one, and then, like I said, from a fire public safety perspective, the fire department has plans and ideas of how to mitigate some of the issues they have. Very seldomly, maybe a couple times a year, they have an issue with how do we get people in and out. They have ideas and they do this and they've made it work. But as we grow, will it?
Mhm.
And in talking with the FAA and stuff, people that I know in the investigatory field down there, how do we put in, you put in a helipad, is it IFR rated, is it not IFR rated, what's gonna build up around there after you build it to whether or not you can even operate it anymore. Those kinds of things have to be taken. So it's not a quick thought, and we need to look at property then.
Mhm.
So that's, and, I mean, if money was no object, it would be easy.
Right. Well, if I can tandem off that, then, I could put things in 1 through 5, but it's difficult to be able to logistically plan those out when, we want city water. We know what that's going to do to this entire downtown business district and then all the outlying roads to connect the communities. Having a centralized water treatment facility with a water tower. There's been some provided locations that, speaking with Tom about, where it's a high point. Then you get to the portion about the fire hall. You're absolutely right. Tandems within the recycling center, because that's currently where it's being utilized. Well, if we are piecing these together, not even just for this upcoming year, but then going long-term as well, we identify a new location for Chief Bailey and the entire fire department to be relocated to, what is to be potentially repurposed with that property. And utilization of that then. Some of the land that I just referenced to is owned by a known individual in this area. It's Stewart Mills, and nearing that area, cooperation with some of these private landowners is going to be pretty crucial. But we can really only talk city water is if we have a good roadmap for funding. Where is it coming from? How many pots are we going to be applying for, and getting that process rolling might be something that we need to do sooner than later to determine if it's even feasible for us to get to that 10 million figure, or we can get to 20, or we do somehow enable ourselves to get to 40. Understanding the growth that's taken place, and I say specifically pre-COVID to at the end of the pandemic, to where we are today. We did see a small decline in population after the last census came through, which shocked me. I actually had to ask Jenny. I'm like, we actually went down four people. But I think everybody in this room and anybody watching and listening is gonna say that that's not even remotely accurate now. We have seen an influx of neighbors, family maybe even moving to this area. My neighborhood has definitely doubled from full-time residents, whether they owned a property and now they're here full-time because why? They can work on their computer. Well, what does that mean then in regards to us and how we manage everything? It means the services have to be expanded. And the services then adds more pressure and stresses to fire, public works. Bethany has that many more applications coming in for planning and zoning. The absurd amount of calls that Chief Taylor has received from police department, and then what's going to potentially continue to increase from there. And we hope it does not, but trends don't lie. And I think we all see where it's starting to be pretty consistent in a certain direction. It's up all across the board. So yes, I would love to see city water, because that just trickles to multiple other projects that can really redefine how we go about down here. We have spent the money, and we have taken the time to discuss in detail the parks master plan. Well, that's obviously a pretty significant project with 3 different proposed options. One of which being rather expensive. We can all hope to receive some additional fundraising opportunities, but that is still an unknown. With that tandem in with the fire hall, with a necessary renovation, or I should say complete remodel or tear down and rebuild of the pickle. What to do with spirits and tying that in. they all sync and they all seem to sync together. It's because we are a small town. We have 18.36 square miles. We don't have a whole lot of opportunity to work with much, so. It's what we have right now that's gonna then go from A to B, B to C, and so on and so forth, so. I want to make sure that we're still providing ourselves with and our staff with everything that they need to accommodate that, so I'll yield my time from there.
I think I know that, when we talk funding sources, I think we're all kind of thinking the same thing about a local option sales tax. It makes sense. Does it make the most sense for? And that might be what, what we're allowed to use it for. So,
Is it a fair question to confirm that as a group? I mean, are we all,
Yeah, I
as a
think it
council
is.
supportive of it? I
Yeah.
think it'd be fair to make sure we ask the question.
and I was gonna throw it all later, but
Okay.
I just, since you're mentioning the funding is for the various things, is all right, so. Yeah, I think we need to look at it. That's my opinion.
Well, I think if you look at all the sales tax that gets paid through the city of Nisswa and we see zero, it might be kind of nice for us to look at that, examine that. I've never been one for the citywide sales tax, but in this instance, I'm open to dialogue on that. So I just think we're missing out on a revenue fund.
Leaving money off, making sure that money's not left on the table. I definitely follow you there. Most of the dollars that are coming into this town are what? It's always tourism. Tourists coming here buying a sweatshirt that's a little bit pricier than maybe it would be at a traditional store or different town. But my personal belief on that is we really should only be implementing that because it adds to then the sale price of XYZ business in this small business district of ours in downtown. What are those intended uses for those funds if we're going to go that route? I don't want to just burden a small business owner with this additional line itemized out before it gets to the total and say, sorry. We're just adding to our budget.
So I have had a conversation with a few of the business owners in town and they said that they would not. The conversation I've had with a few of the business owners in town on a possible proposed city sales taxes is they had no problems with that. But I mean, that's just a few. I don't know where everybody looks at it. I don't know where the citizens look. I mean, that would be on the referendum if it does come to that. I mean, we have a lot of things coming up. I think before we can continue with any development, the number one thing would be to look at water, city water. I'm just coming back onto what the mayor said. I also think that we need to look at with these buildings coming up, you've got the Pickle and City Hall and the Fire Hall and everything. It would be kind of nice if we did have a local or another area for a government and public safety center, district, however you want to put it. So part of that is purchasing land. Where's it going to go? Where would the staff believe it would be best suited if that were what we're going to pursue?
And I'll come back, or we can come back about how do you feel about local sales tax? I can't echo what Mark said.
Myself?
Yeah.
Well, I'd guess before I would start with the local sales tax, just sitting here listening, looking down this sheet, I would just kind of challenge ourselves to actually, it seems like we're getting into the nitty gritty before we know kind of which direction we're going. Meaning, it's been expressed citywide water is important, but also too, we have lift station rebuilds, road referendums, all that stuff. I think that needs to be looked at as a package. We got to run the water down the road with the referendums. But yep, in 2024 on the list, we have a downtown master comprehensive plan, for 2024. And so I don't know that I can speak intelligently to how we're gonna pay for any of this until we stop and kind of figure out which components go together, like the park and the pickle and just like eating an elephant, stop and start at one end and take one bite at a time and work your way through it. You know, that's my own perspective. We're just kind of, talking through this and maybe that's what the design of it is today. But for me, we still need to hone in on the focus and where we're going to start before I can speak to how we might pay for some of this stuff.
Can you go over, Jenny, for example, the lift stations and all that are handled through the sewer enterprise fund? Correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so that's how those are paid for.
Yep.
But what are the
Um,
timing and all that? And how does that relate with the water? And how does that relate with the bonds?
Depends
or
on
the
where
roads?
well, that would be the issue with the water, was that we did ask WSN to put together a plan. It basically was to locate, where would the ideal spot for a tower be? What areas would make the most sense to hook up first? I think we were looking at not the downtown, excuse me. We were looking at Grandview as it stated that they would be interested in hooking up to city water, which would be a significant account right there. Also up and down Highway 371, the 371 business area, not, and it wasn't discussed. The idea came up of bringing it into downtown. But is that like a step two, or is that originally, or what does it do? Those kinds of things, just that look at what do you do and what do you bring it into? And then just like the sewer, when it was enacted back in the 90s, would have been who has to hook up and when. You don't, those are all conversations that have to take place. But, I think, again, where does the money come from? That's a PFM type question. You ask them what's available, what can we do, what can't we do? Roads and street bonds are every 7 years. We do one, we're coming up on one now. If you want to, so where the funding sources come from for a lot of this is actually already figured out. I mean, we know where a lot the roads and streets, sewer fund, et cetera, comes from.
Yeah,
Um,
it's more the time frame. How
Well-
are we looking at this? Are we spending a lot of time on the water tower right now when that's 10 years down the road? Still based upon all these other needs, what's the staff involvement? We highlighted 3 things up there. As far as the roof, this building, but I'm also wondering what's 4, 5, and 6, and does that impact the water, the roads? And just kind of going one line item at a time.
Well, I
Yeah.
think we're gonna end up with multiple oars in the water at once. That's,
certain-
there's
oh,
no, there's no
certainly.
way around
Yep.
that.
Right.
Yep.
But, as far as local option sales tax, it can take 2-3 years or
Right.
more to get it.
You gotta look at, okay, if we're gonna do water, okay, then what are what do we have to do now? In the next 2 years? Water, that may not come up a bit in 10 years.
Right.
So we look at what's 23, 24. Those have to do's. Water, if we come and say we need it in by 5, 10 years, what goes with that? Am I off on?
No, you're not off on that. And so also too with this, what do we have to do? We have to fix roof on buildings, we have to fix windows, we have to repair roads, we have to do this. Do we have to do a water tower? I'm gonna argue, no, we don't. We're in 2023, the city of Nisswa doesn't have a water tower and we're still here. So what do we have to do? Do we have to fix our park? Absolutely, we have to fix our park. Do we have to do something with the pickle? Absolutely. We need to do. So also too, does that really impact it? I would argue that we can build apartment buildings without a water source because we need some housing. So just to look at and really define what are the criterias that we're looking for in our have tos and what are our want tos. you know, and evaluate it that way. So, I mean, I'm all for a water tower. I don't think it'd be a bad thing or a negative thing by any means. But, you know, right now, is it even the proper time for us to be talking about it? Or do we already have too much of the elephant in front of us to eat before we get there? That's what I'm asking.
For my 2 cents worth here, I'm hearing a lot about money and, you know, how do we move forward here? All that ties together. But, to me, there's basically two things, and you sort of have to step back a little bit, first of all. I think, first of all, we're hearing a lot about property. I like the idea of having that center, for emergency services. I think I've heard that, there are some issues that we have currently if we keep at with the same property and buildings that we have right now. But in order to move forward on something like this, the first thing we really need to look at, I think, is property. And I would recommend that the staff here, if we could send out feelers, what is available, how much, who might be agreeable to selling. We need to first look at that, because otherwise we just sit pat with what we have right now. And 10 years from now, will that be good enough? Hopefully it is. Or else we say, no, we need to look at expanding here because the city's going to expand. One thing in my mind, the city is going to expand, but Nisswa has a very limited amount of space that's still available. The longer we wait, the more it's going to cost. It's just economics. It's not going to go away. And we do need to at least look at that. And I would recommend that the staff looks at this, send out letters, send out feelers. Let's start that. That's the first thing we have to do. Without land, we can't do anything else other than what we have right now. So I'd like to know what the options are. And that's a lot of work, but I think that's the first step. The second item I wanted to bring up was when I started here 2 years ago, we had the master plan for Nisswa that was made a couple of years earlier, like 4 or 5 years ago. And I thought it was a nice plan. It was a lot of nice words in it. It gave general ideas, but the problem is what's the nuts and bolts of how you're actually going to achieve those words. And that is the strategic plan. And since I started here 2 years ago, I've seen a lot of improvement there. And the first step right there is the matrix. You know, the Public Works had the matrix before. Now the Park and Recs has matrices. I think that's something I'd like to see staff really push. That's the first step to a strategic plan, to get that matrix set together. And that's the nuts and bolts of where's the money coming from? How much is it? How long will it take to do this? That's the matrix side. The other is on personnel too. We may need to expand personnel. In order to do that, you really want to make sure that, again, we're talking about money. It always comes back to money. So for department heads who want to get more staff or to do some project that requires more staff, basically it turns out to be a sales pitch. And to make that sales pitch for us city council members here, we're responsible to the taxpayers here. And we all are taxpayers here ourselves. So it's really a sales pitch of why would you need to have another person? And I'd like to see it that it's written down related, not just because you want him or her. It's because you need, this is how much it's going to cost. And this is how much we will be able to save because we've done this. Maybe there is no savings. It's a safety issue. We need to do it, period. You know, and this is the reason why. So the nuts and bolts of why you need to have a person hired. And I think that's the more difficult step. Matrices are easier because that's buildings. You're not, that's, once you set up a model of a matrix, it's easy to follow it year after year after year. But once you want to hire somebody, it's going to take more effort. And the reasons for that can be very different. A building is always the same, but people are always different. So that's where you have to make a very good sales pitch in order to get that. And it all comes back to money as well. So I'd like to see that from staff, that I would recommend that we work on that next step for personnel side. So there's more of a method.
Can I ask you to clarify, when you're talking about personnel, you know, personnel for what? Parks, public works?
Public
or
works,
just
fire, police.
So what you're talking about, just so I'm understanding, is are we going to start with defining our current job descriptions?
Well, basically,
And write
basically,
new job descriptions, is that what you're getting at?
well, first you do have your job descriptions, but that's a small part of that for wanting to get another person in. There's a reason why you want another person. Spell it out, make it clear, make it clean, what's the reasons are. And then if we get somebody, how can we afford that person? So in other words, generally speaking, I'm from a manufacturing side. That's my side. We would get so busy that we're doing way too much overtime.
Mhm.
Okay. So if I hire a person, how does that impact the overtime? Can I pay for them without the if we can stop overtime, does that pay for their salary as well as all their benefits? And if it doesn't, 100%, that's fine. But if we're expecting more growth, then let's go ahead.
Sure, so what you're saying is, let's just take the parks. We
Mhm.
put in a brand new park, we might need to hire 2 more people
Mhm.
to take care of what we just did. And what you're seeing is you want to see that personnel side implemented with this current plan and numbers and spreadsheet Jenny put together. That's what you're asking for?
Right. And
So parks grow, we get a new water tower, it's gonna take 3 guys to take care of the water facility side of it now.
yep. And you're going to be charging for water. Okay. So how does that turn out for the people that you're hiring?
Okay.
How does that impact the budgets? As far as a park, that might be more difficult because you're probably not going to charge people to go into the park. But we do need to have this park. We have obligations that we have.
Right. And so by doing that right now at this time,
Mhm.
or whatever, what are we gaining? I mean, I understand what we're gaining. Obviously, have a new park, have a new water tower, need people to do it. But where we're at this point in time, what does that gain us by doing that work now? Shouldn't we start out with what we're gonna do, because it might look different 3 years from now? The water tower is obviously not a 2-year project, and I would just see figuring out that personnel aspect. Actually, when we're so far away from the water towers, it just seems like we'd be spending time on something right now with that personnel.
I don't, you can say things like that too.
Right.
But in my case, what I see is if you don't make a long-term plan, and you don't necessarily have to get into personnel yet. I mean, this is long-term plan. Farther out you are, the less detail that there will be, because it's going to change along the way.
Right.
But if you don't make a long range, but nuts and bolts plan, you're going to go hopscotch along and you're going to miss opportunities, which will make it a lot more expensive in the future. For example, we're looking at back roads,
Right.
on 77, and we didn't buy this one piece of property when we could have. That would have linked this package to that Highway 77. Now, if we're going to buy it, it's going to be a lot more expensive.
Right.
So that's why you want that long term. If you don't do that, you're going to spend a lot more money down the road.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. I guess the nuts and bolts of what I'm getting at is we don't need to do busy work just to do busy work at this stage. Let's determine what our projects are and have some sort of system before we just go and, get drawings done or implement this, let's, like I say, let's back up and, we have the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just focus on that and go there, you know. A long-term plan on the backage road, you know, I just, yeah, I'm just here very, very, common sense looking at stuff. I don't want to create more work for staff.
Right.
Or spend more money on what if scenarios, if they're never gonna happen. Let's make sure that we're at least in some sort of range or set criteria for us to trigger that to happen. You know, I don't think the framework is quite put together for us to be able to make those decisions for when different things happen.
That's
So I
why
guess
we're
what I'm saying.
having this.
You're right.
And
Yep.
that's why it's great that we're doing this, because then we will set up the priorities as we can feel, as in our best judgment, to try to move forward here.
Right,
So that's the first thing. The other thing too is if we don't, even now, we're getting requests from various departments for additional personnel.
right.
And it's very difficult for us to say, sure, let's go ahead, hire that person because you want them.
So my question is, you know, I'm the new guy at the table. What has been the criteria? Well, you know, what is the designated criteria that the city has used in order to hire somebody? Need more help at the pickle? What do we use to hire somebody? What's the criteria? Have the sales gone up? The net profit gone up?
Mhm.
Or just the gross profit? We're just adding overhead, now our net's going down? Are we too busy? Do we have 10 part-time people when we could get it done with 2 full-time people? I mean, what sort of criteria has the city used in the past
You
to
sort
do
of,
that?
for the 2 years I've been here, you sort of described it.
It just
Right
shoot
now.
from the hip.
Yep.
Right, yeah, and so that's why I'm saying it's difficult for me to go ahead and, oh, how are we gonna do this? If this is always shooting from the hip, I'm saying us maybe as now the governing agent of this town, we need to put together some criteria so that our staff knows how we're gonna do it, you know?
And-
It goes up, you know, it goes up, so we pay this, so the bottom line doesn't drop at the pickle just because they're too busy or. I mean,
And
we're
that's,
we're
that's-
dabbling in 2 things. We're in the business world and we're in the you know, government.
and that's what I'm trying to say right
Right.
now, that if, for staff, if they want to, for this particular, if you want more staff,
Right,
it all gets back to money. If you can't get back to money, then it has to have another good reason. Make it really clear and easy for us to understand. And then it's a lot easier to go ahead and move forward as a group. Otherwise, we ask a lot, I would say, if somebody comes to me and says, I want to have this person because I need somebody. Okay, why do you need them? You know, that'll be a natural question. Because if we don't get those answered, then I get people from the city asking me, why are you hiring somebody that's really expensive?
right. And that
I need to be
criteria
able-
should be defined by us.
I need to be able to have enough sales pitch to be able to pitch it to everybody out there as well.
Well, on that note, if I may, I would like to commend both Tom and Chief Taylor. They did do, I thought, a pretty thorough report that was presented to us in regards to why they needed what they needed. And it was 2 positions that we saw the cost, the anticipated cost of what they needed to be able to find somebody qualified. We're not just putting an ad on Indeed and trying to get somebody, which is kind of what most employers were kind of just taking what is local. And on that note too, speaking with Tom in regards to some of the needs for what he sees in his department per se, there is an influx of duties that comes with additional responsibilities on public works. And we do have a expansive sewer system, some that requires lift stations that require additional work, or if we have a year where it's unprecedented snowfall, then it's additional amount of hours that go into it. And what does that correlate to? Overtime. How does that overtime offset if we had another person doing regular? So it's also difficult for us to justify it when we already were trimming down from a 19.6 levy at the preliminary. We had people here the last meeting of the year thinking that that's what it was going to be. We erred on the high side. We didn't have a full council that night, so we wanted to make sure that we had everybody's input in, and being able to bring 2 additional people on when inflation consumer price index was at still is roughly in the same range at a 40-year high before I was even alive. So on that note, yes, I agree. If we set up a specific criterion, I can't even speak if there is one or not. So perhaps there is, and you can enlighten us later via email and share with us what there is. That's great. I'm sure we can apply all of our business sense and personal skill sense to being able to make this thing competent. But I'd like to take this specific workshop and go from first to second gear in regards to the strict criterias of what we're trying to give everybody here direction on. City water, I'm going to address quick though. If we are going to spend the time, which is money, and the staff's looking, seeking, communicating, trying to see what grants are out there for us to do this outside of the impossible amount of bonding that it's going to require. Why are we doing it? Are we actually forecasting that much growth here? Are we encouraging then that much growth here? And is that what, not just what us 5 at this table want? Is that what this city staff wants to be able to deal with? Is that what our neighbors want? We have a few industries here. One's obviously more prevalent than the rest. Some of these backridge roads are proposed to hopefully promote additional growth by having some businesses relocate shop here. And we have to really ask ourselves, is the resources and the wells primarily, are these aquifers stressed? Is there potential long-term damage with all of this traffic that we have in here because of how we have our current water system? Or is it worthwhile for us to do a study to see what's the feasibility of a 10, 20, 30 year? Is it, I mean, we know how much water is around this area. It's obvious, but that would then it would make sure a lot of sense if we're going to do that, to be able to support a business like Grandview Lodge, and that's a great customer of a future water system and additional affordable housing or workforce housing per se. Because you really can't have a large complex without something to that effect, just like you couldn't if you didn't have sewer there, city sewer. And I think if we look back, how many years ago did city sewer come into Nisswa? 30 years ago. Is everybody appreciative that we have that now compared to not having it? And imagine being in the situation right now if we didn't. We have to ask ourselves those same questions, and I don't know if we're all prepared to answer that right now. At least well, yes, but we have to present the justification for such a thing, just as you do for everything else. But because we're so small, the town is so small, one project directly correlates and bleeds into another project. And we do city water, it's going to rip up a massive amount of asphalt surfacing that's then going to require new roads. If we do that, and if we have a new emergency services building, where could that be strategically located? Could that be next to a treatment facility if that's the case? And then that goes back to a conversation about land acquisition. There's 2 very tiny properties that are just right over here that have been listed for what, 4 months, 6 months now. They just dropped in price, but it's a substantial amount of dollars for a tiny piece of property. Case study right there. So I think for the sake of this, and so we can get good input in and make good use of the time, if the immediate pressing things, I want to make sure that we can address. And ideas that come to mind on that is just backing off a meeting that Terry, Brian, and Liquor Committee liaison, Councilman Hall had, and Jenny last week. We spoke about the prospects of everything on the spirits and pickle side, but if we were to increase by a nominal amount the sale price of a keg of beer to broken down to a glass of beer, what would that reflect like over the course of a year? Looking at their profit compared to where it's at now, some of those funds could then be forecasted into, and I'm glad Jenny brought it up. If we have a revenue bond for pickle and spirits, that seems like that would kind of fall in line with that. So that's potentially an avenue for us to cover costs there. City water is going to be able to obviously pay outside of funds, federal grants, et cetera. The cost of it has to be a break-even point, just as it is for the sewer right now. So that's another avenue. City Hall is we're in here right now. I think we could all agree this is a beautiful building. We're blessed to have it. We're always gonna have small patch jobs that need to take place, and we identified those and we incorporated, I thought, 300,000 into this last levy, no? No, okay. That was my mistake then. And then again, the Parks Master Plan, which we've done the study on, so finding revenue or funding avenues for a couple of these is probably the best start that we could make, because otherwise we're talking about something that's not even gonna make sense, and we are putting the cart before the horse. So that's my sense on it.
Well, if I look at 2023 and 2024, parks, they don't generate money. They don't. But they're a necessity to have. The parks plan, I think, was well done. I think it was well received. So if I look at 2023, just let me, I'm just going to go over a couple of things with parks for 2023. You've got the Go Lake Trail. Currently, right now, the city has funds, if I understand correctly, all the way from the Lake Park all the way down to 77. If we want to continue from 77 down, we have to come up with 700,000. Camp Lincoln Road Park, that was land given to us by the county. There is an obligation there. We have to have a bathroom at least put in by December 31st, 2024. Am I correct on that one? Okay. So that is money we need. We do have two, if I look at it, there were two numbers in here. That one was for a bathroom, parking lot and road. One figure that was out there is 43,500. I think the other figure was 100 and some thousand. Where was it? Yeah, the other one was 127,500. Do you know why the difference on those two? Amber? Well,
So on Amber's strategic plan worksheet from last year, that was the 43,500. So whatever that included at that time.
all right.
I think
all
this is, of course, current,
right.
more realistic cost analysis, probably based on the master plan information that you've gotten at this point. That's the cost.
Okay, so if I look at this correctly, and Amber, you can correct me, I don't think the parks needs money outside of then your regular budget. I don't think the parks needs monies for 2023 for any major push. Am I correct? It would just. Right, so that'll bring me to this. So if I look at this, so the one thing that I know that we need in 2024, at least between 2023 and 2024, is at 127.5 thousand for the road, the parking lot, and the bathroom. Also, as I discussed with Amber, she just said the environmental, the archaeological, and the engineering studies have not been done. That's going to be a cost. It's an unknown cost until we get bids. So we're going to have to come up with funds for those. It would be kind of nice if we had those done this year, so we don't come into if you come into a snag, say they find a burial ground, that's going to drag you out too. And I don't know if the county would give us an extension if we did come up to that snag. So let's just say that the parks in 2023, 2024 we have to come up with, I'm just going to throw it out there, 200,000 for that. I know that Amber has been working, and I think the committee, Parks and Rec Committee, has also been looking at phasing in everything that for the parks. instead of one massive boom, it's done at X millions of dollars. We would look at the prioritizing what needs to be done first and so forth.
Fundraising or grant writing. Ultimately, it is up to the council and what the allocate funds and how much funds to it. If you have questions on infrastructure, I can firm out some of that information out of the master plan. And so, yes, the park commission is looking at various options and various plans and consequences, but ultimately in that dollars, in professional services. Rather than more.
And I'm going to jump ahead because I know the one thing would be the rinks. Maybe 2 years life expectancy out of those. So you're looking at breaking ground spring of 2025. You know, there's just some things we have to look at with that. So like I said, we're looking at having to come up with 200,000 just to get things started for parks in the next 2 years.
I think it's worthwhile to ask the
As
rest
of
of
right
the-
now.
Didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think it's worthwhile asking the rest of the council members about what their thoughts are on a $4 million outdoor hockey rink for a small town like ours. What, and then have a discussion about what the additional use, the purposes of it, year round, with a roof, what can be done inside there. Do you guys have any feedback or questions on that?
Well, I guess right away, I'd have immediate feedback and I would say that I disagree that the park does not bring any money into the city. I mean, Wednesday night, there's a current hockey league that goes to the pickle afterwards, and that's a direct revenue source this week from the park to the pickle. You know, and things like that. And I'm, you know, with maybe a little of the outside of the box thinking with a hockey rink like this and funding with the parks, you know, there's always a need for ice time, it seems like, with the different school districts, Brainerd, Pequot, whoever. Maybe there's a fee associated back. If we did do a $4 million things with the school district, you know, outside revenue sources looking at it, there are different parks that charge admission for splash pads. There's all sorts of ways that a park can generate and do generate money for a town. Right. Well, no direct generation. I would say there's a lot of residual that we're not taking into mind, Terry. Right.
Oh, yeah.
In the summertime. Yeah. You have all that stuff. I mean, that is a direct hub for the pickle, generating money for the town. Right, yeah. Right, yeah. Yeah, so that's. So that's what I would say, you know, initially looking at this, you know, and just looking at a $4 million price tag, well, I don't know. That's where, you know, there needs to be a marketing meeting or something else aligned with some of these thoughts on how we're going to do this. Is it doable? Absolutely. You drive around to every other city and you see nice stuff like this. I just maybe don't think that we've had maybe the right people on the right teams to help move different projects like this along in the city in the past to get it done. But I think that does exist, and I think we're smart enough to accomplish it.
One thing about outdoor ice, your figure skaters, things of that nature, for example, up to probably 5th grade, 4th grade beginners, once they decide they really, yep, I want to get into this, they're indoor ice. And it has to do with the quality of the ice, the type of the ice, the hardness or softness of the ice, and safety. Come from my sister's an ice skater. My nieces are both, we're all figure skaters. And that's from the Brainerd, and talking with Matt too, from our previous park and rec director. So, but outdoor ice, I think it's proven its need. I think it's proven its necessity. If it's going to be built, it has to have a roof. That allows it to have other use, especially in the summertime and stuff. It also allows for a guarantee, warranty, if you will, on the actual concrete itself, which was stated to us by the company that looked at the one we have. And if we were to do something new, it's the, according to them, it was the sun is what destroys basically the concrete and why we're having the problems that we're having now, among other things. I think that park is a necessity. It's part of why we wanted to do a downtown plan, a downtown comprehensive plan. And get looking at what everybody downtown wants, what they would like to see, how they would like to integrate everything. The park is a hub. People come to downtown to shop. Somebody takes the kids to the park. I mean, that happens all the time. So it does bring people into town to some extent, just like the park at the lake brings people by boat into town. That place is always busy. If nothing else, so they just walk in from the lake. So yeah, I think that the parks are very important and we need to maintain them. The problem is we've got a lot of stuff built. How do we keep what we have before we start adding on more? Replacing rinks and stuff is considered, I consider it's okay, it's just replacing what we have. But we want to start adding things. We have to take care of what we have first. So I think that's very much worth it.
I just wanted to say, I agreed with you, Joe, that the indirect revenue that we get from the parks, city parks, are very important. So that's what Nisswa is. We are land of lakes and parks, and that's why people come here. So there's a lot of indirect revenue. That's all I wanted to say.
It's impossible to quantify it sometimes too. It's like this past week when we played hockey, the adult league, it was definitely much colder than it was the previous 2 weeks. So what did we then do? We had a couple more pitchers over there. You have family members coming in here, and is a park, the put it in the business sense, I guess, the cost of doing business. It promotes this feeling and the sense of community within a small town. And that is what we're known for. You drive down our idyllic Main Street and it's hometown. It feels good. People love it. Capitalizing on that can definitely be factored in. I think we can do that over time without a doubt. If we have a roof over a hockey rink in the summertime, great place to have a flea market, charge per stand. We can come up with 100 ideas, but looking onto, well, if you'd like to. Yep.
Can I jump in? So I've jotted down a handful of things. I just want to ask some clarifying questions for the group. Just to be mindful of time, because I don't know how long you want to go. So I want to just make sure that we're maybe wrapping some things together through the conversation. So specific to the sales tax, I understand the question about, we need to know what we're doing before, figuring out the funding. However, sales tax is very unique in that if there's no appetite for sales tax, then a potential lot of these projects are just not doable.
Correct.
So for me, it's helpful to know if I get nods that the sales tax is an option for the council, then it allows staff to say maybe this project or that project or whatever that is could be applicable for that, and then we can move that forward. I think from my perspective, parks is going to be the thing that would potentially the sales tax could go for.
From my perspective, I'm for looking into a sales tax, and I would gear it towards the park issue so that we could potentially do a bond, revenue bond. And that might help not just staff in the long run, but us as a council and the city in the long run to know that if something is going to get handled versus a revenue stream, then it'd be good to know what that does. I would also, well, just a minute, hang on a second, Tom. I would also say that potentially it would be interesting to see how much we can generate, which I believe is estimated around 400,000 a year. And would that be enough to do? Would we be able to do a revenue bond, say, I'm just gonna throw some numbers out, say $200,000, where that pays off the bond for the park over X number of years. Would the other 200,000 pay off the water tower if you were to, would you be able to do something like that? Or can you only use it for one? It would be nice to know what the.
No,
state
there can be
fund-
multiple projects. They just have to meet the criteria.
Okay,
Has there been any communication between the city and say the Nisswa Chamber to try to gauge the temperature within their members about this prospect of a sales tax? Has there been dialogue there?
No, but certainly if the council was supportive of that conversation, that would be then the,
and
I am in support of starting that dialogue because they're gonna be the ones that are directly affected by it, that then, they obviously are passing on, but.
And I would be supportive of it as well.
Joe? Thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like more information about it, for sure.
And I think this is more or less just that, right? We're looking into
we're,
building the blueprint so you can present it at a future city council meeting, right?
yes, I'll just share with the council. So the deadline for submission for sales tax requests is January 31st. It's not happening this year. And since we also we need to tie it to an election, unless the city opted to
better
have a
stop the meeting.
special election.
We better stop the meeting and get to work on that. Are you guys ready? I'm canceling my trip.
There's time to make a good decision, to work
Okay.
through that, just knowing the timeline.
Yeah.
But it has to meet criteria. So the problem is it has to meet a definition. So even if the highest expense doesn't meet the definition, then it doesn't qualify. I will just say that the regional impact, I would say the committees have greatly changed in who's chairing committees, who's on the committees. But over the last handful of years, infrastructure projects are less likely to have been approved by the legislature than other projects. So you also have to see where their minds have been and where they're more likely to approve something to be successful in it. So totally understand what you're saying.
yeah.
Would be concerned that they would just deny it outright. If they were thinking you're trying to slide certain things in. So we're very early on. I mean, we should identify the potential.
That would
options,
definitely be
but-
something that, once we get information, you look into it, get us some information back, it would be something to host our local representative and our local senator about and say, look, we have more than one big item here.
Yeah.
All right, and, I know you typically haven't done this in the past for like an infrastructure public project, but could you? And see let them see what the appetite is for something like that. If we don't know, obviously, till we ask. And if the answer is, well, if you put both of them together, the answer is going to be no. Then, okay, or well, it's a very good possibility. Okay, so, we can definitely ask. Worst they can tell us is no.
Yep. Okay. I can start to pull some information together on sales tax. You have that information. Buildings plan, from a buildings plan perspective, we've talked about some of the more immediate needs for that. Where would you like staff to go from a building specific perspective?
What I'm looking at is, you look at the buildings in the matrix, what has to be done, the amount of money that would be spent for everything that we're looking at. I would be up for the staff to come together to figure out. I'd like to hear their perspective. Do they want to put, a couple $1 million into renovating the buildings of what we have right now? Or would they be interested in looking for a parcel of property to put a new, call it the government center, and then repurposing the buildings that we have? I've got an idea for City Hall if that's the way they want to go, but that's just me. But I'd like to hear their input on that. Because I think before we start piecemealing like we have with the ice chiller with the hockey rinks, 10,000 here, 5,000 there over so many years, I mean, that adds up, so. I would like to hear their thoughts on what they would like to see.
I think, we got two pieces of this puzzle, whether we wanted it or not. We need to put a roof on the fire hall. We need to fix the issues in this building because they're only gonna get worse. And I believe the third most critical was pickle. Okay, so I think by putting matrices together over the last year, some of the departments have, were able to get more detailed down than some of the others, but we've got enough detail that we're not going to be able to budget, a line item in everybody's budget every year and say, we're putting this much away, so on the roof or this needs to be done. That's just not gonna happen. I think we're gonna need to look at a building bond. Do we look at it once every 10 years, 15 years or whatever? And we get these roofs done, I agree with Tom. I think that once whoever starts doing the repair work here starts opening up walls in certain places, we're not gonna wanna be in the building to see what they got. It potentially could be a mess. I think we have to fix what we got because we have to keep it together. And, putting other stuff together is contingent on a number of different things that we're not prepared to go and do yet. We need to get better research in on it, but I think that a bond of some type is probably necessary. So, let's fix the issues we have that we can fix. At the same time, I'm sorry, a lot of fond memories of the pickle. But I think it's lived its life, and I think it would be a lot better time and money served to think and start thinking about how would I redo this? Is the building even salvageable, or do I tear it down and start from scratch from a business perspective? What makes the most sense? That's
I have some, I guess, general direction then, and I don't really have much further than that to add, I guess, for this context, but it's clear. If we were, fire hall needs a new roof, and I recognize that. But if we were to go the route of, and I'm gonna refer to Joe, and obviously you Mayor Ryan, in regards to a new fire hall and a new emergency services building. Would that be all encompassing for fire department and police, or just fire? Both? Three, what's the third?
I would say both.
And ambulance, okay,
So
okay.
everything should be together.
So, we obviously know that, there's the field that, Mr. Mills owns is also where helicopters are landing as well. I just have to think that there's some additional unique grants out there because of the area that we're serving. Here north to Walker. I actually don't even know the radius as to what makes, an medevac per se come to here until it needs to go elsewhere, but if we were to have a repurposed fire hall after your whole group is relocated over to wherever the new facility is per se, what can that repurposed building be used as? And
Tom is it would be a great place to host public work stuff, especially in the wintertime.
could that public works, if that future public works facility there, the repurposed fire hall? Please. Okay. Correct. Yeah. Sure. Right. Mhm. So that would be a comprehensive government center that would include city staff, city hall would then be based out of there, okay? But I guess I just have to generally ask then, is this building truly in that bad of a shape where we would then pursue that? Oh, for sure. Right. I understand that. Absolutely.
Wants versus needs.
Yeah. I sure understand. Okay. Mhm. Hmm.
What were your thoughts? I just want to hear from you. Let's say we went to this route where we did a new government center, and do you think this would be a conducive? Yeah, conducive. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was about to add to that too. On the back end of that comprehensive government center, you still will have this building that's gonna have to go through any sort of retrofit or repurposing, right? So additional on top of that. Unless you want to add something, I'm just gonna go through mine quick and then hopefully that'll, help with some additional direction. But in regards to the pickle, I really think a revenue bond could be very conducive for the cost of a new pickle. If a new pickle is the consensus, and I believe that is the consensus after our last meeting with the liquor committee, and we had a good discussion in regards to that. We also then talked about spirit. Owning a building versus leasing a building. I think we're all adults in here. We all understand the equity difference in that. However, what's the purpose of us having that equity for selling liquor? The building owner is very, very friendly to the city of Nisswa. They have an equity stake in seeing the success of spirits and then in part the city. And I think that they're more than willing to work and cooperate with us whenever there's an issue. And Brian, you've been pretty forthcoming that you haven't had much of an issue, really, if any at all. My question is it a multi-year lease or is it year by year? I cannot recall top of my head. 7 year. And where are we at currently on it? Here, okay. So let's just, is that something that's worth tabling? So we have some progress. All right. Truly, if we're looking at immediate, I mean, we know that the pickle's an immediate need, and if any of you haven't, and this is nothing ill against the pickle, it's just the environment that we are asking you to work in, right? If I invite you all to walk in there, have a beer or a glass of water or Coke and sit there for 30 minutes and walk out, take a breath of fresh air and smell your shirt. You will smell like a grease trap because that's exactly what is portraying into the smell in there. And it
Great building in the 70s.
I wish I would have been around to see it. Terry with long hair. I saw a picture, don't worry. Yeah. Well, I only say that though, because it's real and it's something that you endure daily and that everybody else at the city employs endures daily while working in there. And that's the environment, again, we're asking you to work in. It's also the environment that we're trying to usher customers and people that are from here, not from here, to buy a beverage and spend a couple bucks in. And we do know the dollars that that the pickle can generate. We know the dollars that the spirits can generate. We have a great municipal liquor setup in the city. I'm very proud of the work you guys have done, but we want to be able to continue to enhance that. We talk about money left on the table. We ran through the numbers, and if you know, it'd probably be worthwhile to share that with the rest of the council about what a small increase would do, and perhaps a small increase plus a revenue bond to be able to accommodate said I gotta stop saying the word remodel, a new building for the pickle. I think that is an easy decision to be able to accommodate. I just gotta be honest,
That would be great information to get. We could get it out to all of us and. we
Right.
can Give you our 2 cents, you and Joe our 2 cents. and-
Joe.
Or Jenny can give it,
Yep.
we can give it to you and you can give it to them.
I just have a hard time seeing this place. I've been to my fair share of bars in my short amount of years on this earth. I just don't see this place being the spot I'd really go out of my way and have a beer at. You go there because you got the feel. Now that place can be rebuilt to have a similar feel. And I don't have a specific preference, but I do know that the downtown effect is great. And if you yank the pickle out of here, that feel, it's hard to put in words, what ushers somebody to go watch, what's that game before noon? The game show? Yeah, it's pretty hard to put in words, what makes a person want to go watch a game show. The Price is Right before noon at your local watering hole that's owned by the city, but we got it. And we don't want to lose that type of thing. It's the sense of community. So I love the location. I love the area, I should say, of the location. And we can really incorporate that. Maybe get a little bit more unique on how we have the ball field placed if we rotated it 180 and had home plate right over there. And you got a viewing deck where you're serving beverages. Or maybe making a concrete path that's frozen with ice from, you know, the deck area over to the rink. I'm in favor of that. My other ones, and I'll go through quick, a sales tax and then fundraise for the rink. I think that's brilliant. And especially if we take 50%, 75%, whatever, that would really help the bonding side on that. I think that there's some donors that go without being said that would be interested in perhaps contributing to a project like that. It's a staple of the community. And furthermore, we can offer naming rights and get them to have a little bit of involvement on that too, on that side. For work within the city hall and government buildings, I'm going to recommend a bond. It's just going to be the cleanest route. And then keeping the lease on the spirits, that's obviously on the table for the next 6 years. So really the big hurdle that I see right up front is city water and fire emergency services, or tandem with all three, as we stated. If we can start the discussion and getting additional avenues really laid out as to what's feasible, what's viable, what are we able to get, that will then be it'll be a domino effect, I think, as to the planning, the true planning portion of it. Once we get the fundraising, that's all the money. You're right, but I think that'll help. So I hope that helps. I just want to throw I don't have anything else to add right now because it's just too premature.
Well, I think council members can follow up with Jenny with ideas that come out of this, or if you come up
Yep.
with something, let her know what you're thinking so she can let us all know.
It's difficult, right? It's kind of the chicken or the egg thing. We have to start somewhere, and we need to just have some conversation and just to see where that naturally flows. Thank you. This was very helpful for me especially, but I'm sure for everyone to hear the conversation. Something that will add to this is in February, we plan to have the presentation for the Parks Master Plan. I think that will help give you a better picture and vision of what that looks like. And then that will help you decide based on timeframes for improving, replacing some of the equipment, how you want to do that. And if that's something that you want to pursue. But in the meantime, I will work with staff to put together some additional info. I think some more information regarding funding options would be helpful for the council for these items so that you can have a better picture of maybe what we're thinking could be doable for that. So I think that would be helpful as well. And yeah, as you think about this, I'm sure more ideas or thoughts will come. Please let me know. That will be greatly helpful. And then and we'll go from there to schedule our next meeting in a couple months.
I have two more now since I just sat here and stopped talking for 5 minutes. So I'm sorry, but actually specific to department that I work with Bethany in planning and zoning, restrictions for complexes, housing complexes. If we're going to try to encourage that, and that would be then a great driving force or use for city water at any given point in time, that would need to be revisited, and then being able to then make it more accommodating for the type of workforce housing. And then you obviously get the topic brought up of affordable housing, and is that what Nisswa wants? Is that what we need? We know that Grandview has a massive amount of labor demands that they have, not just seasonally, but year round, but then additionally, all of these restaurants in this area that service tourists. And then lastly, Jenny and you and I spoke to, we spoke to the state after being recommended that contact from a friend of mine, Rachel Dame she works in the governor's infrastructure department, about funding for these back roads, and how they even stated that some of these funds haven't even received an application. Whether it's even 50% or 100% of that cost, that's something to factor in too. So at least try to get some of these funding questions taken out, so a headwind can turn into a tailwind. That would really push all this along. And when we have our retreat in, what was it, Hawaii? Yeah, Hawaii. We'll all be able to really tackle these and get them done in a quick relative time frame. So
For us.
yep.
Mark, did you have anything else?
The only thing I wanted to say is I think having the water tower is a good idea too. I think that would create a lot of revenue as well. So, but in order to do that, I would like to see more looking into properties, investigating what's available, what makes sense as far as if we go ahead with the government center. If we don't, what else would we need? Because it is limited. The space we have is limited. It will not get cheaper. And you could always purchase property and let it sit for a while too, before you make your other plans.
Well, and again, that piece of property that I think Woodset Smith Knowlton, well, not this one right here, but where the water tower location was at, that's privately held, and that, that's a different approach than just going on to the MLS and searching for a property that's got a price tag on it. So sometimes you do pay a premium at that point too, and depends how at least when that point comes, we better have at least a semi rock solid plan. Otherwise it's a wasted conversation, and it might not be entertained a second or third time.
We need to be ready to jump when the opportunity comes.
Joe, anything else? The only thing I appreciate staff being here tonight. Thank you very much. I hope this was helpful for you. It was for me. The only other thing I would ask staff too is don't hesitate to be proactive. If you got ideas about things for your departments and that, look into them. Talk with city administrator about it. Talk with your liaisons about it. Don't wait for someone else necessarily from the council level to have to bring it up. If you got ideas and stuff, even if a fire hall might not be, while any of us that are currently sitting here are even still employed in the city or any around, let's not hesitate to throw those ideas down and start looking at stuff. I have no idea what a new bar looks like. I don't do that. I just use bars. I don't work at them. That's why we have guys like Terry and Ryan. Okay, so we need to use your expertise. So please feel free to work with city admin on that. And for the council, I mentioned this to Jenny, get with her. If you have sources, people, things, ideas, let us know. Unfortunately, we can't talk together, so we got to go through her. So, yeah. Okay. If there's nothing else, motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Okay.